Hello, welcome and thank you for checking into the Film Stop. Today we're talking about ISO. Now before I continue, I'm going to ask you to go ahead and click the subscribe button and hit the notification bell to get more updates of any upcoming Film Stop videos. So let's go ahead and discuss ISO. Now we've been talking about exposure, and we've talked about aperture, and we've talked about our shutter speed. If you fail to get good exposure with these two, the last option we look at is our ISO. Now what is ISO? ISO refers to the sensitivity of light on our sensor. Now if you look at your camera, you'll have values from 100 to up to 6,000 or 25,000 values of ISO. Or depending on different camera manufacturers, there are certain values of ISO that are recommended for photography and film. Depending on the camera you're using, there are some cameras that will give you a good picture at 800 ISO optimum at an optimum value, or a good picture at 640 of ISO as an optimum value. Now ISO can be quite dangerous or delicate when using to expose our image, because the higher the ISO, the more grain we get on our cameras. Now what is grain? Grain is little dots you will see on your image. For example, if you're taking a photo in a low light scenario, or any scenario actually. So if we're dialing up our ISO and we get grain, this can reduce the quality of our image. Now I've given you an example here where I used an ISO from around 6,000 to up to 25,000 ISO. Now as we move above our ISO higher and higher, we get to see that our image quality is reduced due to the amount of grain in our image. Now what is grain? Grain are the little dots you see in the image due to the camera trying to compensate for lack of light to actually bring out your image more clearly. Now if we're able to look at ISO, our camera here, our D5300, the optimum ISO that is recommended by my manufacturer is around 640. So if I go above 640, I probably get a little more grain in my image or a little bit more grain in my videos. So whenever we're looking at our exposure, ISO is usually our last go-to when trying to expose our image. Otherwise, I'd really just play around with my aperture or my shutter speed. Now there are cameras that are more have been developed to have a better sensor, and therefore the ISO above 640 or 800 or 1000 or 2000 won't have as much grain. Now these are probably cinema cameras or cameras with good sensors. So if you're looking at your camera and you're seeing grain by about the 1000 ISO or 2000 ISO, that is quite normal for any DSLR camera. Now if you want to upgrade and use a cinema camera, you can go up to 2000 ISO in video or still, and you'll still get little to no grain. So that is it for our exposure. So we've looked at aperture, shutter speed, and ISO in trying to create a good image or a good quality image. Now go ahead and take your photos and give me the feedback you have.